All right, Keith Kurlander, welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited to talk with you. You are a founder or co-founder of the Integrated Psychiatric Institute, I believe, right?
Yep, integrative. Yep.
Yes, and I know that you work with psychedelics. Or within the therapy context, and I'm fascinated by that. It's something that I've been very curious about for a while, and I'm excited to have this conversation because I want to understand where the science is on this, like where the government is on this, like how close are we getting towards like this idea of actually using these life-saving treatments in many cases.
Awesome. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah. So, I mean, firstly, how did you get involved with this whole with your institution, and what was your journey towards building
Yeah,
it?
so the institute is about over a little over 7 years old. We it's myself and the other co-founder is a psychiatrist, and I'm a psychotherapist. So I was working as a psychotherapist for 15 plus years prior to the institute. That's my formal training, and we came together because we were just really fed up and frustrated with run-of-the-mill mental health care that people are getting and seeing just the mental health crisis that we're facing,
Yeah.
not just in this country, but in most countries. And we wanted to just bring some more education to the professor, the professional sphere, and also to people interested in this stuff around what's really causing these problems and how do you actually tackle them. And so that led to a number of different types of educational programs we have, including psychedelic therapy, which is kind of the latest and greatest intervention we have for the moment until we have better ones.
That's really exciting. I'm curious also, like, there's obviously a need in the world, and definitely in America, and definitely all around the world, right? People have trauma, people have depression for unknown reasons, people are suffering, they're anxious, right? We naturally, or whatever, maybe this is like a cultural push, right? Like we, especially in America, where the consumerism and all that stuff, like to just work. Like one of the biggest issues I deal with my clients is 60-hour plus weeks, you know, and they drive themselves to this point of like, I am not enough, I'm not good enough, and they keep pushing, and it's just some type of distraction, and it's very sad to watch. It's very sad to watch, and I think that this is a story for a lot of people, and again, like I could be biased here because my experience is working with these types of people, so it's like, I'm seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence of this, but there's definitely a lot of trauma and stories that we hold on to and we get stuck on. And I'm curious, like, how have you seen psychedelics or maybe some other types of treatments? How have you seen that unpack some people's stories? How has that created the change that people need in their life?
Well, I'll say that first. I mean, I agree. So there's certain people that use work and overwork as a space to run from themselves. But it's not everyone that works that
Right.
much, but it's one sort of condition of running from oneself. Uh, Work could also be the opposite. It could just be that's where they express themselves, and so they're working a lot, and it feels really natural and flow. But then there's a lot of ways we could obviously talk about how people run from themselves right now, and that's a very serious emerging problem. So there's that issue. And then, of course, you mentioned trauma, the term trauma, and the trauma has been an issue for humans for many, many, probably many thousands of years, 10,000, plus, where it's really taken hold on the species in a way that it's many people have a traumatized nervous system to some degree. There's a spectrum of that, of what's a traumatized nervous system and how much is it playing out in your life and
Mhm.
inside of you. But yeah, we've been suffering from that for a long time, and I think that right now there's a lot of people suffering from trauma in their nervous system, and it's actually being expressed in themselves and in their lives, and we also see that increasing substantially in teenagers. The rates of mental health disorders, which are fundamentally probably linked to trauma on some level, is astronomical, and it's increasing, and the curve is scary. And we're just sort of watching this. So with all of that said, here we are, and we need help, and we need tools. And can psychedelic therapy be a tool, one of the tools, to help us with this issue
Right.
and to help us live more fulfilling lives? And the answer is definitely. It's not a panacea by any means, though. It's not for everyone, but
Right.
when it works well, it works wonders. And so, yes, it's a great tool. And then, I mean, I could pause here. I could go a little more into your pointed question of like, well, how does it work?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious to understand like how that does make the shift. I've had my own experiences with psychedelics that were not therapy based. One was a ceremony, and another I did a mushroom experience with a therapist. That was like underground. It wasn't. It's not legal
Mm-hmm.
in New York to do
Mm-hmm.
psychedelic integrated therapy with mushrooms. At least from my understanding at this time. But
Mm-hmm.
I did do that, and I had a recreational experience with friends, which went horribly, and happens to be the one with the therapist also was a very difficult trip. So I do want to understand like how it does work. How would a therapist use this in the right ways, and like and also to talk about some of the dangers because I think that that gets overlooked. Like it is kind of a miracle treatment in a way with the fact that it can create healing in one use. You know, a single use can literally change a lifetime of difficult patterns and resentments and can help people to truly let go of that stuff and to rewire like to learn new things and when that happens it is something that we should all pay attention to, but I'm curious to understand more about how it works and then also talk about some of the risks as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So let me say a little bit about where we are in terms of, what are the medicines, what can you access? Because that kind of leads into how does it work depending on the medicine and what's happening. And so, kind of as we go down the rabbit hole of psychedelics, which is a rabbit hole, we'll kind of start at the top, like where are we at? So where we're at is that right now, the only psychedelic medicine that's accessible legally through medical use is ketamine. Um, so ketamine has been around since the early 70s. It was primarily has been used in anesthesia as to help you dissociate from your body for either outpatient surgery, inpatient surgery, or can also be used for severe pain, like in the field in war, in like the field medics kit or in the paramedics kit when they come pick you up and you've had an accident. So that's how it was primarily used. And then in the last 15 years, it started really gaining traction in lower doses than that for mental health treatment. And so what we discovered, and there's lots of research on ketamine, including a full FDA trial for one version of ketamine, is that it works really well for treatment-resistant depression in a specific protocol, like not like go get ketamine off the street from, your friend or whoever and just take ketamine. That's not, there's a
Right.
protocol. And so it works really well for treatment-resistant depression or just, significant depression.
Yeah.
It can be, depending on what you look at, what study, upwards to 70% of people who take it in these protocols, their symptoms will be cut in half. And that could be one session that we're
Wow.
looking at, as well as studies showing that people with significant suicidal thinking, they could do a ketamine session and it instantly goes away, which
Wow.
is crazy.
And
Um,
even post the like
yeah.
interesting.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yes. Post the session. Now, the durability studies are not extensive. We don't know how long, and there's some, but I don't know that we know exactly. But there's definitely evidence to show 3 months to 9 months or a year, even in some of these cases plus. So I would say that, ketamine, if we start with ketamine, how does that one work? So let's just start there. So it's different than what a lot of people think of as psychedelics. It's not a classical psychedelic. Classical psychedelics on the 5-HT2A receptors, serotonin receptors, they cause like the, visual sometimes and different perceptual changes and things. Ketamine is a class called dissociatives. And so ketamine dissociates you from your experience to some degree. Um, and that can be everything from having out of body experiences to actually sort of dissociating deeply into your mind and like actually looking at aspects of yourself from the past in a way where you're like kind of disconnected and removed,
Mm,
and kind of it sometimes feels like watching a movie of your past so that you can actually process things with some distance from it.
mhm.
It's hard to describe and it's always different, right? But like there's also like the whole psychedelic world, like trippiness of like having all these crazy experiences of other dimensions and things like that can happen.
Yeah.
You can have ego, your ego can dissolve on ketamine and, moving into like oneness or nothingness. And
Mm,
so there's a lot there. Now, how does it
yeah.
work? The final kind of coming to your question in this case, which is that biologically, um, most of the studies are not with therapy, interestingly, with
Mm,
ketamine. Biologically, ketamine seems to do a number of things, but there's sort of this process of dendritic sprouting and new neural growth and maybe some new connectivity between brain regions. It's possible that there's some anti-inflammatory effects happening. And so that's sort of the biological basis of what might be happening with ketamine. And then uh, there's also this aspect of how it alters one of the networks in your brains, the default mode network, which then kind of moves us into more of the psychological, where we can have an experience of greater psychological flexibility, where we're more open um, to ourselves and other perspectives,
mhm.
even other worldviews. Um, there's the possibility of having sort of an ego dissolution experience, where we have to then confront who are we really. We might have to confront the perceived experience of death. So there's all of that, and then there's the trauma, which you mentioned, which is like often psychedelics in general amplify trauma inside of ourselves. So when that happens, ketamine specifically, since it's a dissociative, we kind of feel removed from the trauma and kind of work with it. It's not always like this. Sometimes it's you're like in it, identified, and you're actually like having a really hard time. But like, so you could feel a little removed from it and kind of process this amplified trauma, whether it's just feelings and sensations or actual memories. So I'll pause there. That was a
Yeah.
big mouthful.
No, I mean, that's really interesting and fascinating how that works. And one thing that's coming to mind, like you were mentioning, how it's not something you just can buy off of somebody and then try it. It would be almost similar to saying like, oh, I know that's surgery could be life changing. So like you buy a scalpel and try to like do that. It's
Yes.
it's really
Yeah, it's very similar.
yeah. It could be really irresponsible and very damaging. Yeah.
Well, let's stick with that for the moment. And you mentioned that you had a challenging experience. I mean, you've had a challenging experience, right, on
It was very
psychedelics?
challenging. Yeah. I don't mind. I'd
Yeah,
love to talk about it honestly, but
yeah.
yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, you've had that,
Right.
right? And so, like, this kind of metaphor of like the surgeon, you're just cutting yourself open. It's like you just take psychedelics, even if it's in a recreational setting, and it's like, but then what happened?
Right.
What did you find?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You don't have to share a lot, but like, what's the gist of it?
It was really crazy. I mean, I was going it was other dimensionally. It was, like, totally I think okay, so, just for a little more context, my first experience was an ayahuasca experience with, my piano teacher who was a shaman, and that was, it was very difficult in the sense that it was, like, intense, but very positive, very, I would say meaningful and, extremely just profound. It was truly, like, in a sense, the reason why it was so difficult and painful was because it felt almost like and again, this is it's a cheesy analogy and it's probably a bad one, but it's like taking the red pill from the Matrix, where it's like you kind of
Hmm.
it's nice to be ignorant. It's nice to feel like, "Oh, I don't know, nothing is that special. Life is life, you know." But like when you take a substance like ayahuasca and you feel like you're traveling into some type of spiritual dimension where you feel meaning and love and such connection to the world and people around you, like you get the sense, which is a positive. It's a gift. You get the sense of like, you know, you're actually special. The world is special. Everything is a miracle. Like the fact that everyone is around is not. It's not meaningless. It's not like it's also hard to put into words because like as people who have worked with psychedelics know, there's a certain like I forgot the word. I think it's like ephemeral experience. Like it's just very hard to explain and put into words. It's something that like when you're there, you have this very clear understanding of like how precious and mystical and magical everything really is. And then when
Hmm.
you're out of it, it kind of feels a bit like a dream and very hard to explain. But that was a very positive experience, but very intense because it was like sort of like took away the mode of living that I was in before that experience, you know? I thought that I could do mushrooms, like, it was a few months later. I thought that I would be fine doing it, and I took a very high dose. I didn't realize it was about, like, 4 grams for context, which is a very high dose, and I think the difference between that experience to the ayahuasca experience was, like, in ayahuasca, I was sort of able to control the visions in a sense that like when I would close my eyes, I would have the visions. When I would open my eyes, you know, I would come back to reality. I was still connected. I was kind of like in both worlds. Like I was in the other dimension where I wanted to be, and then when I didn't want to be, I was able to come back. On the mushrooms, I could not come back. I was like in a different dimension. I had no ability to come back to, you know, to recognize that like I was back in my body, and it felt like timeless. Like it felt like a really long time. And
Yeah.
yeah, very so that was extremely, extremely just scary. And there was like painful moments also that were very difficult. Ultimately, like look, there was good that came with it, I would say too, but it was damaging experience, I would say. Like after that experience, like it gave me like anxiety for a good year where I was like literally dealing with
Yeah.
yeah, like existential just dread and anxiety. And it took me a while to get out of that. Which
Yeah.
like yeah, that's one of the dangers. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's, so that was in a recreational setting or where?
It was with a few friends in an apartment, like, we were just gonna do it together. I took the biggest because I again, it was very naive. I thought, like, I had experience with ayahuasca, like and again, it was only one experience, so I thought, like, I'd know it, but it's a very different substance, very different experience. Yeah.
And were you like, was there intention of why you were taking this with your friends, or was it just like, let's just see what happens, or was like there was like,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna do some work on ourselves? Like, what was the?
Yeah, it was more like we were open, like, nothing we were all safe. We were in a safe setting. It was like, yeah, maybe we'll, like, work on ourselves, but more just to be open to the experience of whatever comes up. And, yeah, yeah, there
Yeah,
wasn't, like, any it wasn't, like, at a concert or something like that. It
yeah.
was,
Well,
yeah,
this is, you're bringing up this whole concept of what's called satin setting, and
right,
the mindset you go in with matters, and then the setting you're in matters, and the setting matters in the sense of, is there a guide there,
right,
or is there no guide there? The mindset matters of like, what are we really doing this for? Like, are we very clear on why we're doing this? And maybe it is recreational. That could be one mindset. But, why are we doing this? Are we doing this to really look at something in ourselves? And okay, if we are, do we have the resources we need to do that? So these things really matter, as you're pointing out.
yeah,
And so sometimes in experimentation, people do get injured.
yeah,
People do feel traumatized and didn't have the right resources to process the experience. And then maybe they didn't find the right resources after the experience, if that happened, because you can keep processing an experience
right,
with the right resources. So all those things matter,
yeah,
right? So yeah, psychedelic therapy is sort of this structure that's created to use a medicine, um, with a therapist, with a mental health practitioner, if we're talking psychedelic therapy and not necessarily ceremony, can help process. You took a big dose, so you you went out there, but to help process what came up for you, maybe while you're out there, if you were able to talk, someone could have helped you with that. If you weren't able to talk when you came back, to process that integration back to ordinary consciousness, and that's that can help, one, get a lot out of the experience, and two, reduce the possibilities,
Yeah.
or just reduce, this thing where it could feel more damaging. We reduce the likelihood of it. It's not that it can never happen; it can happen. But
Yeah. Exactly.
so
So
that's that. So here we are,
right.
ketamine, psilocybin. Just to say, psilocybin is not federally legal. It is not available outside of clinical research, or in the state of Colorado. It became available through the Natural Medicine Act in the last couple months. It's available now if you can find a healing center. And that's a state-led measure. It's still federally legal. And then in Oregon, it's available for now a couple of years through an also state-led measure. And outside of that, there are some countries where you could do this, Amsterdam, for instance, and Holland, and then some other places. But with all that said, that's psilocybin, just to kind of
Right.
name the legality of psilocybin so people know.
Right. So this is the other thing. I did it a second time, a slightly smaller dose, 3.5 grams, with a therapist he's done like many guided experiences. So he had a lot of experience and stuff. It was still ultimately very difficult and challenging, but not as bad.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting with the raw material, 3.5 grams, 4 grams. Like, first of all, those are on the heavier side of doses.
Right.
That's the first thing. The other thing is you don't know how much psilocin is inside of that batch.
Mm.
So there's a wide range. If you were looking at, the psilocin in there that's causing this experience for us to have happen, like, it could be a big range. So 3.5 grams could be like another batch of 5 grams.
Right.
It could be like another batch of 1.5 grams. So we don't know that either. But generally speaking, that's still a sizable dose you took.
Right.
Just
Right.
so you know.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm curious though. Also, it's like you mentioned this Natural Medicine Act that they've enacted in Colorado, and in Oregon, a similar measure. What's interesting is that I think a lot of other cultures have a culture and an understanding and tradition and way of using some of these medicines, in a way that is extremely healing. That I think it's kind of that conversation needs to be had, and I guess we're trying to work out like a Western version of this with regards to like making it legal for therapy use. But I think that idea is very important of like creating some type of guardrails, whatever it is, because I honestly I feel like it's very missing. Like healthy phone use. What is the healthy way to have a relationship with your phone, with your technology? Right? Like we don't have
Yeah.
we don't have
No,
these kinds of
I don't have a good answer, but
yeah,
it's not me. But
right.
it's a problem.
Yeah. But and I feel that the work that you're doing is so important because you're leading this conversation and this and that's one of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to you, and I want to understand like what are the kind of guidelines that you figured out either through your institute or elsewhere to
Hmm.
use this stuff safely, whatever the substance may be, ketamine or psilocybin.
Well, so there's different contexts, right? So there's, our institute specifically, we're teaching licensed professionals how to guide psychedelic therapy sessions. So that's one structure and context. Is it is it's probably the most safe structure reliably to use these things in. If we just say reliably, there's still you could still encounter something that doesn't go well for you there, like a bad therapist or something. But reliably, I'd say it's the safest structure because, one, your guide hopefully has a lot of mental health training, and there's a lot of things that can get stirred up from a mental health perspective that it's good to know and understand and be able to differentiate as like the guide or therapist, right? So that we're not missing something and over spiritualizing it, for instance, as a go-to. when maybe we're dealing with something that we have to deal with in a different way.
Mhm.
So there's that element, and then hopefully, the container, like you're in a safe room, hopefully, and things feel like there's some real attention to the setting, and then there's also a very structured process, hopefully, of like you're doing preparation and you're learning about it and you're setting intentions and you're working on some issue, and then there's like the actual session, and then you're doing integration after, and there's X amount of sessions, and so ideally there's this big structure. So I'd say there's that. Then there's ceremony, which is different, right? And so ceremony, like you said, in some places has been going on for a very long time. Is what medicine we're looking at. But we see aspects of psychedelic use or ceremonial use for a while, upwards of many thousands of years that we know about, potentially much longer. I mean, the psychedelics have been, psilocybin has been growing in fields for a very long time. So it's possible that people have been taking psilocybin for tens of thousands of years. We just don't know. Um, and so what we do know, though, is that indigenously, these medicines have been used, some of them, whether it's peyote or whether it's ayahuasca or it's psilocybin, for a long time. Um, but they were, under a different framework. And now ceremony can be a very beautiful thing for people to experience. Is it held well? Is it held with someone who's well trained? Is it within a lineage? All these things. So that's just its own thing,
Right.
ceremony. And, uh, that's not what I've done a lot of ceremony, but it's not what I'm teaching about. I had a period in my life in my 30s, I'm almost 50, where I did a lot of ceremony. I was going to Colombia and doing ceremony. And so that can be a very magical thing. And there's spiritual pros to that approach. Some of the cons to that approach is sometimes some of your trauma and your mental health stuff could get missed. Or you can end up in just a bad setting, which is also, you know,
Mm.
that's not good. So there's that. And then there's recreational use that's been going on in this country pretty actively since the 60s is when it really took off.
Mhm.
And then also in other countries. And so that's its own world. There's whatever. I mean, it's fine. Like, people are going to just do what they want to do and explore things and maybe just go have a good time and all that. And there's a lot of risk in psychedelic use in the recreational space. You can really stir up some animals inside of you that you don't have the support for. You could take too much and do something that you regret later.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening. So, yeah,
Yeah. Keith, I'm curious to kind of understand more about your story. We touched on it in the beginning, but how did you discover this? Like, you mentioned the ceremonies and stuff. Like, what was kind of your path into this journey for yourself?
yeah. So I'm 49. So my path started at 19. So I did psilocybin for the first time. I was at University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and a bunch of us did psilocybin. I went up to my room eventually. I was alone, and very quickly I became flooded by some feelings that were overwhelming me. And I was having the experience of sort of a recognition, is what I felt like myself. I'm like, I've always felt this way. I've known I've always felt this way. And I had been struggling. It's just, it was very suppressed. And, but I did have some problems, but it was very suppressed. And I was like, oh my God, I know, I'm in so much despair. I'm so withdrawn. I'm so scared. I'm so alone. So that led me to wanting to kill myself that night. And I walked over to the window. I was in like the 19th floor or something of a high building.
Hmm.
And I was going to, squeeze myself out of a window. And anyways, I had an hallucination of my 5-year-old sister at the time that told me not to do it. And it caused me to get back to my bed and just sort of hold on for dear life for the rest of the night. And then that erupted into a very serious mental health journey for me that went on and off for most of my adult life, looking for answers.
Hmm.
So that was the beginning. I had multiple sort of explorations with psychedelic to see how they could help me.
Mhm.
And but I've used very little psychedelics in the last 10 years. I'm very sensitive, and so I don't, I can't do them very often, and there needs to be a real purpose. And so now it's, I've done a ketamine therapy treatment in the last 10 years, but outside of that, I haven't really done much psychedelics. And but then I've done a lot of psychedelics prior to that to sort of explore things, not like psychonaut level, but a lot. Like I was in an ayahuasca church and did a lot of ayahuasca over time, or a good amount. So I've explored these things through different mechanisms, as well as lots of other healing things, um, to see how do we get well.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's been my whole adult life.
Yeah.
How do people get well? How do I get well? How do I help others get well to live an inspiring life? And that's
Yeah.
that's been my adult life.
That's really truly fascinating that, you went on this journey to try to answer those questions honestly. And I'm a little curious, like that first experience you had when you were 19, right? Like you're mentioning how it made you confront truly what you kind of have always been feeling and you wanted to take action against it. And then you saw your sister, kind of pull you back from the ledge, literally. Um, and I would have thought, like, I'm not doing this again. You know what I mean? Like after that experience, like what gave you the idea to continue with psychedelics? Like what were your other
Oh, I,
experiences?
I told myself
Yeah.
after I told myself, remember this, never do this again. But I did do it again.
Yeah.
Um, well, what I came to realize, now this took a really long time,
Yeah.
was that I had a lot of complex trauma in myself. And that took a really long time to know that. It was not, trauma psychology was not well known 30 years ago. In fact, trauma psychology is really emerging in the last 10 to 15 years as something that we really need to understand.
Yeah.
And it's still misunderstood in the practice of medicine,
Hmm.
what trauma is. So I kept, going around the ring of like, let me let me explore it from a spiritual perspective. Went deep in there for 10 years in the yoga meditation tradition, and let me explore it from the psychedelic perspective. Let me explore it from the therapy perspective. Let me explore it from a psychiatric perspective.
Hmm.
So I've been around, and they all have their different ways that these things help and heal us. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to understand also, like, how did these different things, like, what did you learn from yoga? What did you learn from, like, more of this spiritual? I'll share a little bit. Personally, I grew up Orthodox Jewish, right? More,
Okay. Did you know I'm Jewish?
yeah, I knew you're Jewish.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I grew up Orthodox Jewish, and but more on the traditional side. And actually, this is fascinating. My parents came from Uzbekistan, which is former USSR, right? Like when the Iron Curtain started to fall, they came late '80s. I think it was just after the Iron Curtain fell. Anyway, so basically, I think within my community, there is a lot of intergenerational trauma and just from communism and from being part of a more collective culture to being in America where it's much more individual. And there's a massive culture gap, like between the children who are dealing with a new set of challenges in America and New York specifically, which is where most of them came, to the previous culture, which just was not able to survive in the way that like family support and everything, like this idea of like individuality is kind of foreign. Like in this kind of culture, you're really supposed to respect your elders. If you have an issue, like that your elders are kind of maybe like violating your boundaries, like that's kind of normal, right? Like they all lived in basically the same house for like 2 to 3 generations, right? And it's like this, but here in America, like kind of this idea of like, well, I have to put hold myself as a person, like just wearing hand-me-downs, like it's not cool, and the parents don't get it, right? So there's this whole struggle, and I think, and again, I don't know if this is like high relative to other communities, and I don't know the numbers, but is a big drug epidemic in the Bukharian community with using opiates. Massive, massive epidemic. I think it's like slowed down massively. I'm not even sure why in the last 5 years, but before that, it was like people I know, like my age, have died of overdoses, and it's like very strange, very scary, very hard to understand. And it's like that's a symptom. But yeah, sorry, I think I was asking you a question about yoga and spirituality and how that like the and you were talking about
Hmm.
intergenerational traumas. Yeah,
Well, let's stick with the Jewish thing
sure.
for a
Yeah,
bit, and then we could go more broader to more broader spiritual
yeah,
conversations. But the Jewish piece is interesting. Um, so a few years after, well, maybe it was in that journey or it was after, I can't remember, but I was hallucinating and seeing SWAT stickers on walls. And um, now I didn't, and it was scary. And I was like, okay, what was that? Right? Like, then I was just like, well, whatever. I hallucinated SWAT stickers, right? I didn't know what was going on at the time. So then later, not related to psychedelics entirely, in my 30s, I was doing a lot of trauma therapy work on myself. And I started to uncover intergenerational trauma around the Holocaust. And you don't need to have a direct descendant in the Holocaust to have intergenerational trauma around the Holocaust. So, but I do have some far off descendants. But so, anyways, that led me into doing a lot of work around intergenerational trauma at some point. And so I think that why I bring this up is because, first of all, Jews have a set of baggage there that's large, that is living in a lot of Jewish people. But I bring this up because a lot of people are suffering from intergenerational trauma. We've been mean to each other for a long time on this planet. A lot of people have somewhere in them intergenerational trauma. Most Europeans came to this country because they were fleeing Europe. I mean, we forget that. So there's potentially, intergenerational trauma from that, even if it was hundreds of years ago or whenever it was that people started coming. So there's a lot of that going on in humanity, and it's very hard to you gotta care a lot to try and process that material, and you gotta stay somewhat psychologically sober, not make up a whole bunch of stories around what you're processing that you cling on to. But there's a whole piece of healing work is intergenerational trauma, not just your childhood trauma or an acute episode of trauma. Like it's a big piece. So, the history is following us right now on this planet, and we haven't learned yet how to deal with that to free ourselves from the pain we've created here.
yeah, yeah. No, that's very well said. I'm curious, like, what was your Jewish journey and like your experience? Like, how were you able to, like, how did you understand why you saw the swastikas, and were you able to kind of like, did you have some deep understanding of like, oh, this really like you maybe never realized how much you were carrying like this threat of anti-Semitism, and suddenly became like in your conscious awareness, and then like were you able
Hmm.
to move past that? Like what was kind of the
Yes, I
yeah
was able to move past that. And psychedelics did have a play in that. And I'll share about that. But it wasn't only psychedelics. I also did a lot of trauma therapy
mm,
where I was able to access. It was very somatic for me of just like feelings of, like you're saying, threat and fear, uh, agitation,
mm,
um, and paranoia. I mean, I didn't even know why, but I was always the guy that's looking in the rearview mirror, afraid of getting pulled over. And I'm a white guy, and I'm driving around as a white guy, having that fear.
right.
And if I ever got pulled over, and it's not rational. Like I'm having that fear as a white guy, like, oh my God, are they, what's going to happen here?
Mm,
And I eventually had a question, like, where is this coming from?
mm,
Um, and but it wasn't just that. Like I had a lot of other types of paranoia and just fear and dysregulation. And so there was definitely pieces which I haven't talked about from this lifetime, obviously, and maybe the bulk of it is. But as I started to really process in some of these sessions and with different types of techniques, I started processing the pain of the Holocaust. And I had eventually went out to different camps and went there and sat there and tried to work with my feelings. And had a crazy experience after going to Auschwitz. I was leaving the camp and I got on an airplane after this big multiple week journey that I was took by myself to deal with this. And I was like not completely sure what happened if I processed that much. And I sat next to in Poland. I was leaving the airport. I was on the plane. The guy sitting next to me as we're taking off asked me why I came to Poland, and I told him what I was doing. And it turned out he told me he was in the Nazi youth, indoctrinated. And then he looked at me and he just said, I am so sorry for the pain I've caused you. It's going to ripple across time. And that healed a big chunk in that moment. It was just
Wow.
like, whoa. It got seen from someone related to it. And so it didn't heal all of it, but then I've had a psychedelic medicine, a ketamine therapy session where there was another, like, kind of after I'd done all this work for so much time, where I had this vision of all the Jewish people from the Holocaust, just basically saying to me, like, thank you so much for paying attention and doing the work, and it's time for you to go and move on and just live your life, and you can let this go now. And so there's been a lot of healing there, but it's taken a lot of dedication. And, ultimately I can't say 100% that I know exactly how much intergenerational trauma has affected me. But one thing I do know is that whatever narratives we use to heal ourselves, as long as we get the healing, it doesn't matter how much or what exactly. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If it works for the healing, it's enough to use, what we see and believe in narratives to heal ourselves. And so, yeah, I'll pause there. But
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you
yeah,
so much for sharing that story.
yeah,
Really, really moving, honestly. Like, to like you were saying, it's not even that you had such a great connection. I think you mentioned maybe some distant ancestor.
very distant. Like great aunts and uncles that I never know. No, nobody talked about them, kind of
Right, right,
thing.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, that had such a big grasp on you. Like, you're afraid to be pulled over,
yeah,
and then to have that type of healing experience where the person was able to acknowledge that. It's such a coincidence. Like, you're sitting next to this person at exactly this time of your trip where you're going through Poland. Right, that is pretty bizarre. What's the word? It's a kind of like a synchronicity there.
yeah. It was a synchronicity of healing.
Right.
It was, and it's like, you could be like sort of a rationalist and just say like everything's random and whatever. That's fine. That's like one way to think about the world. But this thing happened that was like so
Yeah.
specific.
Right.
And so, I think that healing and there, there's a magic that I'll never be able to explain. I don't think science is caught up enough for me to explain it, but I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned earlier the doing yoga and your spiritual experiences. I think this is something by and large kind of lost in Western culture. Like, we look at it as almost fringe in a way, but in reality,
Hmm.
like, it helps a lot of people. And the point is, like, mental health is so much about your interpersonal experience. Yeah, so it's like, if it helps you, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if we'll talk a little bit about that. I mean, so religion is obviously around quite a bit still,
Yeah.
right? Like it's still a big part of people's life. And orthodoxy is interesting because there's often even though it's it can be a dogmatic religion, there in Orthodox Jew, in Jewish Orthodoxy, there still can be quite a bit of mystical and spiritual practices going on in there and connection.
Yeah.
And that happens there a lot. With that said, religion, if we talk about spirituality, like they're not necessarily one and one. There's different purposes for religion. Some of it is spirituality, some of it is other things. But I got by age 20, 21, I was like very intrigued around spirituality. And I think it was coming from two places. One was I was just kind of oriented that way as a human,
Mm.
always very curious, whether it's about God or the essential nature of things, or how does the universe work, or whatever. I felt philosophy. Like, I was just very curious. And then too, like, I was also looking for, like, how do you end suffering? Like, that's what was my question, was like,
Interesting.
how do we deal with this? How do we
You and the Buddha.
over me and the Buddha, how do we overcome this problem? Right? Like, that was driving me because I was suffering.
Mm.
So I was like, what do I do? I got to do something or I'm just going to be suffering. So that drove me instinctually to yoga.
Mm.
That it wasn't really around when I was 20, 21, like not where I was. And if it was around, it was in pockets in some of the big cities, and that was about it. And it was still small potatoes compared to now, but it came through me. And so I sought, you know, a yoga teacher, and that was a large part of my 20s, was really focused on how can the teachings in yoga and meditation, be a refuge to suffering and live a fulfilling life. And so I dove in there. And those, that path is its own unique things, but there's a lot of the trauma techniques we have today come from, in part come from these ancient traditions, whether they're breathing techniques or somatic, where we're sensation techniques, where we're focusing our attention on sensation and doing something with it. Like a lot of some of these things have underpinnings in these traditions.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
DBT specifically, and
Hmm.
yeah, just the mindfulness-based approach is so powerful. Like to be able to hold tension and notice what's going on inside, regulate yourself, and come back to a calm. These are techniques that have been used for a very long time. It's not like,
Very long time.
uh,
And what's not known about yoga, I just happen to have attracted. My teacher was brought yoga to this country. Essentially, there was a few teachers that brought yoga to this country. He was one of them, from India, and he happened to have been a very body based, a somatic yogi on some level. And so, he taught me from early on that really what's happening with yoga is, like, we are decoupling, use that term, but we're decoupling the associations we've made over time that are coupled to sensations, right? Events and memories, they're coupled to sensory experience. And so the reason we go and we stretch and we do these things is we start to amplify the sensory experience in these places where potentially we started bracing or holding, or, and we're getting attached or avoiding and getting numb based on history. And so we're decoupling the memory system in this process, which is really what we do in trauma therapy. In trauma
fascinating.
therapy, we're decoupling our associations. If it's a bottom-up approach, meaning working with the body to come up
Yeah,
to the brain, we're telling the body it's safe. We're telling the body to calm down. We're also looking at the places we're braced or we're numb, to decouple these memories. And then once it's decoupled, the nervous system will let go.
hmm,
That's how it works. The nervous system is, basically working through this combination of memory system, triggering patterning in the body. And so once you release that, the triggering in the body can release.
it's fascinating. Yeah, truly. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's very strange that like you would think. I mean, I guess it makes sense too, but it is strange. Like you're talking about, like imagine, for example, just holding trauma in like your arm or something, right? And being able to like stretch that and kind of release that tension. There's a specific type of therapy. I forgot what it's called. Uh, I know somebody who's working with a type of therapist that does that kind of work where like
Uh-huh.
you hold. It's something about like you get like micro movements in the muscle or something, and like you stimulate it to like let go of trauma
Hmm.
there, and they've
Yeah.
been swearing by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
powerful.
There's a lot of different stuff. There's somatic experiencing, there's massage techniques like Rolfing, and there's a lot, on and on. There's a lot of different
Yeah.
ways.
So, Kid, what do you see? Actually, before I move on, I'm curious, like, to close the loop on anything. Like, was there anything like mind blowing about your either yoga experience or something else that you think is not talked about that you want to like shout out? that you've had some really
Yeah, I
incredible.
think that's a good question. You know, my experience with yoga and being in spiritual circles and doing all that for a long time. I'm a little more removed from that now, but on one level, it was very regulating.
Mm,
On one level, I definitely experienced some more calmness, more integration, potentially more inspiration in my life. So that was there, and I think that spiritual practice can do that to, we could say, God, or um, I don't know what your word people like to use, but anyways,
whatever it is.
just unity, or getting beyond separateness. So that all happened, but then what also happened for me, and it does for a lot of people, and it's very hard to catch, is we end up actually dissociating in our spiritual
Mm,
practice. The difference between integration, connection to a larger whole, and dissociation and detachment, the difference between non-attachment and detachment is very blurry. And so non-attachment and, getting, less stuck in
mm,
emotions and stuck inside ourselves, versus detachment, being disconnected from our body, and from spirit on some level, whatever we say that word is. It's very blurry. So I think a good portion of my work as trying to become a yogi, I'm detaching and then dissociating in meditation, and not always. This is a delicate part of the spiritual path.
mm,
And so sometimes we end up avoiding our personality, and we avoid our relationships, and we avoid the way we relate to ourselves and others through spiritual practice. And those things don't change a lot. And that's why you see a lot of teachers, they fall from grace because they start acting out.
mm.
Like their personality just keeps taking hold, and they act out and they get in trouble, they get canceled or whatever. Not encouraging canceling people, but it's just like uh, spiritual practice can be a tool to say, I'm checking out of this game. So that's a delicate issue in spiritual practice, but doesn't mean you shouldn't go do spiritual practice. I mean, you should. It's just something that you have to, that's always going to be there no matter what you're doing,
Yeah.
spiritual practice or whatever, psychiatric care or mental health care, any of this. Like, are we checking out or checking in? Like,
Mm,
that's a question that has to be with us along any healing journey, because we're very sophisticated at this
mm.
point, and we will find ways to check out around things, and everyone's checking out around something.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
still blind spots in us,
Yes.
so it's just something to be
Yeah. Like, does that
aware
spiritual
of.
practice, does it actually enhance you, or is it a way of escape in and of itself? Like, I think from my own experience, I grew up more traditional Orthodox, like I was saying, but eventually I joined what's called the Yeshiva, which is kind of like a Jewish monastery. Are you familiar with like Yeshiva culture?
Oh yeah, I mean, I only went to yeshiva for 2 years
Mm.
before I moved to New Jersey as a little kid.
Yeah.
Uh, my dad went to yeshiva his entire education,
Right. Right.
um, and so yeah, I'm very familiar with that world.
Yeah. So what's interesting, in some of these like right wing circles, they do post high school, right? It's just a full day of Torah studies of really
Mm.
Talmud. So it's like from the morning, literally from 7:30 in the morning until 11 at night. It's just like prayers, Talmud study, philosophy study of like just ancient Jewish texts, like all day. Very very few breaks. There's like an hour break 3 times a day, basically. Mhm. So very very intense. And I think, like, while I was there, I was able to see also, and probably also to myself, for myself to some extent or other, like, you would see sometimes somebody that suddenly falls into it very strongly, and typically, there's, like, a connection to, like, this all or nothing thinking of, like, "Oh, I'm on this path, and I have to do this fully and be completely committed," and there is a very, incredible dissociation and kinda, like, rejection of the self to just try to fit into this ideal. And it's very interesting to see that, and I think at the same time, like on the other side is like the community and the meaning and the spiritual experience that you actually do get from diving into these texts in such a sincere, meaningful way where it there truly does feel like almost not completely euphoric, but almost like somewhat euphoric, in feeling like you're doing something incredibly spiritual. And not everyone feels that way, but I certainly have at points, and I know many people that do. There is a beautiful connection there. So it's such an interesting question. Like, does this thing actually connect you and expand you and help you detach without, completely being unattached and using it as a way to like almost like continue the traumas and to beat yourself up and to almost be in like a
Yeah.
cult, right?
Yeah, I think it could be used either way, right? Like
Right.
there's been many Jews that have used the path of, Talmud's essentially the path of philosophical reasoning on
Right.
some level.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say it's moral debating, but it's also philosophical reasoning. And, yoga has that tradition too. I think it's called Jnana Yoga. Philosophy, the exploration of philosophy is the path to enlightenment, per se. It was always described to me early on as it's actually the slowest path, but it brings into a sense of if enlightenment is a thing, it brings out an outcome that's actually a very unique type of way of way that you can serve in the world too. So it is a path,
Right.
but you can use any path, like you're saying. Like any path can become a distraction from self and dealing with the hard stuff
Right.
in life, the ordinary hard stuff inside oneself and outside of oneself. And, that happens. And I think that it's hard because it's really hard to look at what are the shoulds inside of you
Mm.
versus what's actually you.
Right.
That's a hard thing. I was sort of fortunate that happened to me right when I graduated college. I was just sort of confronted by that. And I
Yeah.
was able to be like, I'm done with shoulds. But, like, when you look at the data on midlife crisis around purpose and work, like there's a study in Europe that showed that 1 in 2 people had a midlife crisis, and predominantly it's around meaning and purpose. And so it's like most people are driven by shoulds
Mm.
and don't question it. And that's the same with religious practice. Many people are driven by shoulds.
Interesting. Yeah.
So if you're driven by shoulds, then you're not going to be driven by who you are. You're going to distract yourself from who you are.
Mm.
If you're driven by who you are, like you might be the rabbi who, goes to yeshiva and follows it all the way through childhood, all the way into like becoming a rabbi, and then like or whatever they do
Yeah.
with that. But like, and that's very natural, and it's an integrative path for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Keith, I want to ask you, how do you see the future of therapy?
I like to try. I like to sort of pontificate about the future a lot. So it's a good
Okay.
question. Well, for me, this question goes into what's happening in the next 100 years, and we are on a technological curve that we can't even digest and understand at this moment. What's going to happen in the next 100 years the last 100 years will basically be like that was preschool,
Mm.
and we just jumped to like varsity, in 100 years. And everything before preschool was, like in terms of technology, was just like, took 10,000 years. Like it was just so slow.
Wow.
Okay.
Are
So
you
the
talking
next
about like
100
with
years,
AI or something else?
it's AI. It's going to be a lot of things. So the next 100 years, we're talking about a quantum leap we can't digest. Um, and we see that because, now that we've made it to generative AI, which was a big step. Rules-based learning before that and all of that kind of stuff was hard to get to. But now that we made it to generative AI, the next steps are going to come pretty quick. So when we get to, generative AI is like we have machine learning that's producing information that
Are
can
we
bring
there yet?
information. Sorry, generative AI, yes. We're not at artificial general intelligence yet. Like
Interesting. Okay.
ChatGPT is
Right.
generative.
Gotcha. Okay.
So when we get to the next stage, so that there's sort of a sub-stage in between there, which is agentic AI, which is like AI starting to act like agents that can perform tasks for you
Mhm.
that you're normally having to do online and things like that, and that even gets into robots and whatever.
Yeah.
When we get to AGI, and that's where we can't comprehend yet
Mm.
the next 100 years. That could be 10 years away. That could be 30 years away. We don't know for sure. That's when artificial intelligence is as smart as any human.
Mhm.
And in the next 100 years, it seems very likely we'll get to artificial superintelligence, where artificial intelligence is now smarter than humans. Now, once that happens, when your question of where is healing going, we can't even comprehend where healing will be once that happens. We will be able, for sure, to manipulate the brain in a way where we are not dealing with the shit we're dealing with that has felt like primitive for the last 12 13,000 years. Like, we're not going to have that stuff will start to go away, meaning emotions completely getting the best of us, ruling our lives. We're not in control of them. We're a mess. Like, that level of, there's a spectrum there, but some people are really controlled, over controlled, and mental health disorders that interplay with emotions and the brain. Like, we can solve a lot of that probably in the next 100 years, I think.
Fascinating. You think through like
s-
some type of neurological intervention.
It'll probably be a neural implant of some kind. It may not. It probably will be.
Fascinating.
And there's no way I mean, whether it's 100 years or 50 years or
Yeah.
400 years, like, that's coming. I know
Yeah.
right now it's like heresy to be like, oh my God, you're gonna put something in your brain. But it's like
It's
the
gonna
things
happen.
we're
Yeah.
dealing with now, the way we're treating each other, the struggles we face, the suffering we face, like, we're gonna have a shift as we start to show people, like, but yeah, but it's like gonna be better when we solve these things. And there will be this heresy thing and religious divide around it, and all of that'll happen, but there will be that shift. So that's coming. The problem with that, so that's positive. We will evolve. The species will evolve, and we might still be the same species at that moment if it's just a neural chip, but eventually the species evolves to where we're not dealing with the things we've been dealing with as a species inside ourselves for the last many, many thousands of years. And I'm talking about more of organized civilization. I'm talking about, what we were like as hunter gatherers, and it's a different conversation. So what's crazy is we're on the precipice of us being able to deal with this issue. We call it mental health issues, and the suffering we face inside ourselves, and then also, how we can often, the violence that we do to each other may be unnecessary sometimes. Like, we can
Absolutely.
solve that soon.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well,
But
yeah.
there is a danger
Right.
coming too, that, you listen to any technologist or futurist, like, there's a very serious danger. And I'll just mention it
Sure.
because as soon as AI gets conscious, which one day it will probably. So I don't know if that's AGI when it gets conscious, or artificial superintelligence when it gets conscious. But at some point, if artificial intelligence gets conscious, we are at a moment of, if it doesn't think it needs us, we're in a problem.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
something we can't
Yeah.
comprehend. And so that's where we're headed. We're headed toward the evolution of the species, right? That's going to happen at some point. You don't just stay a species forever. It evolves. We've evolved all the way to now. Like, we came from something else. We will evolve, and our evolution will include evolving with technology. That's where the species evolves. We start
Right.
integrating technology into our species, and we evolve to something new. So that's not that far away.
Yeah, honestly, I think like with regards to implanting something in the brain, like that's only a matter of time. For sure, people are gonna do it. Like,
It's already done.
yeah,
It's already been done.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Neuralink has already happened.
right.
So, as far as when is it mass adoption?
Yeah,
Is it, how many years is that? That we don't know, but it's not that far away. I don't
100%.
think it's that far away.
Yeah, I think assuming it is possible, which I don't see a reason why not, like it's gonna happen. And I think like imagine you could just open your whatever, or even mentally, however this technology is gonna work, and just feel regulated just by pushing a button, right? And that's the type of neurological implant that we're talking about, or to even feel different types of feelings, right? Like you just want to feel good or whatever. So to be able to like control that with an app, so to speak, right? Like
Mhm.
that's probably going to be possible at some point in the like near future, meaning 100 years.
Near future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And then it like all the other stuff, it's kinda like who knows, right? Like what even is consciousness, to think that likely AI will become like it might honestly be conscious already. Like who really knows what consciousness is? But
Mhm.
like this idea of like uploading your consciousness or something like that, It just
Mhm.
becomes it becomes fascinating because like if that is possible, how would you know that like that's not already what has happened? And like we're in multiple layers of this kind of like consciousness transfer thing, for whatever reason.
Well, we won't, but
Yeah.
what's crazy is it's not science fiction. The
Right.
science fiction conversations
Yeah.
is starting to become
It's becoming really real.
nonfiction.
Yeah. It's
And
becoming
we're
real.
right there. I mean, we're a little young for it in terms of like seeing like this crazy,
Yeah.
change, but it's very close. And
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
that's hard to digest. Like people are having trouble wrapping their heads around how close this is
Yeah.
because but we see it going so fast. The curve takes off fast once you get artificial intelligence
Right.
online.
Right.
So it's coming quick.
That's
But we don't know where it's going.
yeah.
Will the species just evolve and we're not in bodies anymore. We're
Yeah.
not in these flesh bodies and we're in something else. Like I know this sounds like science fiction, but the reality is this could be within the next 500 to 1,000 years. We're not even in this body anymore. And
Yeah.
again, that's heresy to the person thinking now, but everything evolves, every species evolves.
Yeah.
Our evolution is clearly going to be technological
Right.
evolution. So that's where we're going.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're already living on our smartphones basically. Like it's just a step further. The thing the thing that I kind of a question and a comment. The comment is kind of like what I'm most concerned about with this is like who's controlling the technology in the meantime, right? Like I'm actually more afraid of humans controlling AI than AI becoming aware, right? Like I feel safer with like technology becoming aware versus like the wrong country has their hands on AI. Like who knows where that goes? Like the wars and the greed and the hate and the dogma. Like I personally I would hope that a smarter, intelligent being would not do those things, right? And then again, it's like what do we do to chickens? You know what I mean? Like something that's so smart, right? Like we can't even comprehend like we might be to this AI like how we view a chicken. You know what I mean? It's like it's hard to know where that goes. But the question kind of is like imagine if you can kind of control your mood through an app, so to speak. Like is that even healing? Is that even good for the species on like a deeper level aside for like the way I kind of imagine it almost is like you feel fine doom scrolling on your phone, right? Because it's just calm, it's regulating, you get those dopamine hits. But like, is that actually good for you? I really don't think so.
Well, there'll be stages
Yeah.
through this issue. The first stage of the problem is if you can control your mood and you remove challenging experiences, challenging moods, that's a problem because then our tolerance frustration goes down to do things that are difficult to achieve great things in the world
Mm.
or even great relationships in our life. So there's that stage that will be problematic by just if there's something that could remove moods like that. I don't think ultimately though I think we will keep learning and what we're going to want to create is a mechanism that allows us to stay more in inspired states with a regulated nervous system, releasing trauma from the past, but we still can have moods move through us, emotions move through us. It's just that they don't hang around as long. I mean, we're going to perfect this over time, but I think there's going to be stages where we fuck it up pretty bad because we're pretty addicted right
Yeah.
now to distraction.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of problems there, and there's going to be stages of learning. The question is whether we're going to make it through these stages. I mean, you brought up something you just said that is, again, hard for, I think, humans right now to wrap their head around, which is we're entering an inflection point because technology is going to curve so quickly. We will create weapons and systems to hurt each other that we won't be able to control and defend against as easily. Keeping a bomb in a some tunnel somewhere is one thing, but it's like when all the weapons are now inside of cyberspace and that really gets really complex, like it's going to get problematic. So that's an issue. Are we going to make it through that well?
Hmm.
I don't know. I think we're at a serious inflection point there. That's coming soon to a theater near you. So whether whether civilizations get past this point, assuming there's other ones in the universe, which seems very likely considering the universe is so large and there's so many blue zones in the universe where civilizations can happen and time has been going on for so long. There's probably many, many civilizations. how many get past this moment, I think is probably challenging. I think this moment becomes very challenging in the next number of hundreds
Yeah.
of years. It gets more and more challenging before you see if you can come together as a species to get past it,
Right.
or whether you really get burdened down. So
Right.
we don't know.
Yeah.
We're at the moment where it's going to get super complicated
Yeah, exactly. Like
soon.
it could be really scary, honestly. I think also like personally,
Yeah.
I definitely think there probably are intelligent aliens just because it's like, I don't know, what are the odds that the universe is so massive and it's been so long and we're the only ones here? Like
It's extremely, extremely low odds. I think
I
that,
feel like, yeah,
especially
right.
if you follow, astrobiologists, and it's low. I think that
Fascinating.
there's no other organisms. Now,
Right.
how many are, how many could communicate directly to us right now,
Right.
and how long would it take that's
Yeah,
all that
exactly.
relativity stuff is a problem. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's very likely there are millions upon millions of civilizations out there. I mean,
Right.
it's, there's trillions of galaxies
Yeah.
with hundreds of billions
For
of
sure.
solar systems
Yes.
inside of each one. Like,
Yeah.
there's obviously other civilizations.
They've got to be out there. Yeah. I think personally, like this
Got to
is
be out there.
for sure. For sure.
And if they're not out there, then this is even more weird.
Yeah, right. That'd be pretty crazy.
So
There's
that.
It would be pretty cool if we were the first ones, because it's possible that it's so much harder than we think for multicellular life to come to exist. But like I think,
it's possible.
yeah, I think given the
But
rules,
it's unlikely.
yeah, like why would this
unlikely.
have been the only time that happens? But I think also it's like who knows what direction they might have evolved in. That they like what type of life form would they even be? Maybe even if they are out there, they might be the robotic AIs that eventually come to be and then.
I mean, it seems
terminate
likely if we ever get communicated to, I think it's likely we're dealing with artificial intelligence that gets communicated to us. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just when just the span of space. I mean, I don't know. I mean, unless somehow, because you also have to stay alive for a long time to get further and further across technology.
Yeah.
Like you can't. So it's like you have to deal with the mortality problem. So there probably some kind of, if we ever get communicated to, it's probably some AI system that is communicating with us, I would think.
That, right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't personally believe there's a bunch of organic material aliens coming to this planet at
Unlikely.
this point. I don't personally believe that. I think it's pretty unlikely that's happened, but
Right.
I'm not saying it hasn't,
Exactly,
but I don't
right.
think it has.
And it's like we haven't gone there yet, so it's like who really knows what is possible? But yeah, I think that they probably have some type of like the reason we don't see them, assuming that they're not on like visiting us secretly already, is probably that they have like some type of agreement. There's probably some type of alien like council somewhere that's like, oh, we don't interact with the humans or whatever alien species on whatever planet until they reach a certain point. So it's like not to interfere with their natural development.
It could also be that it's just really freaking hard to communicate with anyone because space is so damn big.
Right, that too.
That it's just really hard. And it could just be that it's really hard to travel really fast.
Yeah.
And even if you're traveling really fast, it's still really hard to get any communication. Like maybe we get a communication in 1 million years from now and it came from 3 million years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
So like, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're telling me something from 3 million years ago. And now we can't even say anything back.
Right.
It'll take us 3 million years to respond to you. So there's some real problems here unless, unless there is a civilization that is like figured out some quantum stuff that like they can move around.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's
but
fascinating.
If they have, where are they?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like,
Right. I think this brings me into another thought with psychedelics, I think, is that like there are people that believe that like and I'm not closed off to this idea, but there are definitely people that believe that like when you use the molecule, right, like your brain is channeling kind of like a different dimension, right? And there are people that report having communication with extraterrestrial beings, either in the sense of like aliens or gods or other dimensionally kinds of beings. So it's like I find it fascinating too that like, and this is kind of a side point, but it's really connected, how mushrooms, for just as an example, evolved to have a molecule that can create such an altered state of consciousness. Like that is fascinating. Like, and I think if you have an experience,
fascinating.
yeah, and if you have an experience,
fascinating how ayahuasca,
right,
which is the combination of these random, plants and vines and but you need both together to
Yeah.
have the experience. It's fascinating. How the hell did anyone figure that out?
It's pretty bizarre.
But it's also fascinating that exists in nature.
Right.
Why
Exactly.
are there
Yeah.
meaning altering substances in nature
Yeah.
that affect meaning making in humans?
Right.
What is that about? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
It's
I
really
don't know.
something. Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had those experiences of where I'm like, oh, I think I just connected. Or was that like aliens or something in another dimension? Like I've had those experiences.
Yeah.
And maybe it was. I don't know. But, maybe there are other dimensions we can't understand beyond fourth dimensional reality, like that we just don't understand. And that there's some way that those dimensions can actually engage. Maybe, why rule it out?
Yeah.
It's possible. I think it's also possible to make up a lot of shit in your head. So you got to be really careful there
Exactly.
because the narratives you create, if you get too attached to them, they can also become a distraction. So you got to just be mindful. But of course it's possible. It's possible that somehow consciousness is able to cross dimensional spheres from living inside, 3 dimensions plus space time, a 4-dimensional sphere, to somehow going to, if there's other dimensions, and string theory says there are, but if there are, like somehow we can connect to them. Like, I think that's possible. Is it happening? I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
This is honestly just a very fun conversation to have.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess closing thoughts, like within the near future, I was kind of maybe more asking, like, how do you see therapy kind of evolving? Like, where's the next frontier? Like, I think,
the next
yeah,
frontier in the next 50 years of therapy is technology, for sure. Now, I don't know what that is, whether it's whether that's I mean, I know some pieces of that. We might see some gains in virtual reality being used in psychotherapy. Now, that's already happening, but it's not widely used, and virtual reality still has some issues with it. But so there might be some gains in usage of virtual reality in order to confront things about ourselves, because it's sort of like creating a psychedelic experience where you can
interesting.
get removed a little bit from your experience in order to confront your experience. So it's a little less scary. You could turn it off. You still know it's not happening on some level, even though your body thinks it's happening. And that's that's sort of what psychedelics can do. So we have that possibility. We have, I think, we have implants that maybe aren't as radical as the ones we were talking about, that we're seeing that might gain a lot more traction over time, like vagus nerve implants that are being used for some things right now, but maybe that increases. So we get a little more control over the nervous system for regulation, basically, right? And there's some studies. There was just one published around one of the vagus nerve implants. Some of these are used for different things that aren't mental health related, but there is some that are used for depression. But they could go a lot further.
Yeah.
So we'll see that. We'll see some more around that, I think. Then we'll see precision medicines come. So mostly we've had sort of gross shotgun approach medicines. I mean, whether they're antidepressants or, in some ways are more precise, I think, in terms of if you're trying to treat psychosis, they sometimes can work really well. But so we'll get more precise medicines.
Hmm.
That's coming in the next 50 years.
When you say
we
like,
haven't,
no,
yeah.
when you say precise medicines, like, what are you referring to? Like, and
Well,
this is,
we'll create
yeah,
another wave. Like we
mhm.
really have stalled out in psychopharmacology, I think. Like there's not a lot of new medicines coming out for depression that really do anything. I mean,
Why do you think that is?
because we're looking and we don't have the science yet to understand how else to do it. We stalled out in the approaches of working with the neurotransmitters in a certain way.
Mhm.
But hopefully, and it might be through artificial intelligence that we're working in collaboration with, that we start to understand the brain in new ways, and we start to create more precision medicines that can help us with some of these conditions we're struggling with. So precision medicines are definitely going to evolve in all areas of medicine more and more in the next 50 years. That's clear. and that will also be in psychiatry. But that's not right around the corner for psychiatry of all these great new medicines, other than psychedelics, which is cool.
Yeah.
But that's sort of old and new medicine, right? And so,
It's
but then
old, but
so
it's
we'll
new.
see that it's old, but
Yeah.
it's new. So then
Right.
we're going to see more precision medicines, and we'll have slowly get cool new therapy techniques and this kind of thing, which has been evolving.
Yeah.
So that's where we're headed. I think, if you and I were talking 50 years from now, it'd be a very, very different conversation in terms of the type of tools we have.
Fascinating.
Um,
Yeah.
very different. Just like it's different now from 50 years ago. But it's different from 50 years ago. But it's not radically different. It's radically different than 100 years ago, right?
Right.
So, but we're going to have a radically different now in 50 years from now.
100%.
And
Yeah.
that curve's going to keep shortening,
For sure.
right? And then like
Yeah.
the conversation in 25 years, mind blowing,
No.
to the point where it's just like rapidly unfolding.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
that's our past conversation though, where it's like you get to that point and hopefully, we don't kill ourselves.
Yeah. Hopefully. All right. Just curious question. Like, are you excited for that future? Do you think that things will be positive?
I I am excited. I think that I wish I could see it,
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very excited for the future. I'm optimistic on some level. Am I convinced that the human species will figure it out and stay along? No. I think we have a good shot at it. We have evolved. We have demonstrated up to this moment in time that we seem to keep figuring out. But are we going to make it? I'm not positive, but I think we will. I'm cautiously optimistic
Yeah.
that we're going to make it through this and actually get to some really, really crazy cool shit, which we're already at some really crazy cool
Yeah.
shit. We got this far. Not easy to do. And we did it. And here we are. And we get to have this conversation on Zoom, or online. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is crazy.
That's really insane. Yeah.
It's awesome. We
Right.
got this far, and like we have all this knowledge we've built on, and all this philosophical knowledge, and scientific knowledge, and religious knowledge, and spiritual knowledge. And so I'm so grateful I get to be here and experience this. And stuff's going to get super interesting now, very quickly.
Very excited for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Before I kind of close up here, I want to ask you, where can people find you?
Well, predominantly I would go to psychiatryinstitute.com. That's the Integrative Psychiatry Institute's website. There's a lot of resources on there, whether you're a professional or just, inquiring about things. And then the Higher Practice podcast is our podcast. And we're on the moment on a pause, but we have 150 episodes in there. There's a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
Some of it's for professionals and some of it's not. So there's a lot of good stuff there.
That's really awesome. Yeah, guys, the link will be in the description. Definitely send over Keith some love. Check out the podcast. I really, really, really enjoyed talking to you, Keith. Thank you so much
Me
for coming
too.
on. Yeah, this has
It's been a
been
great conversation.
Yeah, very fun.
Yeah.
Keith, if there were one thing that you would want everybody to know that you would yell from the rooftops, what would that be?
The only person that's going to create a fulfilling life and overcoming the obstacles through healing is yourself. No one's going to do it for you. And I recommend doing that and committing your whole life to that because, for one, it's really cool when you start getting higher levels of fulfillment. It's a very cool experience that's personal and narcissistic, but that's that element. Two, we're healing the world when we take on that mission, and we're contributing to the possibility of a species that goes really for the long game, and our children. And so, if you care about your children and your children's children and your children's children's children, and you're committed to that path, you're going to serve in some way in this world that contributes to healing and collaboration and growth in the future. So I would say commit to your own healing path because you're doing it for the world and you're doing it for yourself.
It's beautiful. Wow. Yeah, it's like the good that you do in healing yourself, it goes farther beyond you. Like you interact with the world and people around you and family and your society and your future generations. That's really meaningful message. I always close with this. I say stay curious, You're more capable than you think you are. Think for yourself and to the rebellion.
Nice.
All right.